Finance Director Eric Christensen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this item is to adopt ordinance number 786 to establish the 2022 surface water management surface charges. In accordance with the city's financial policies, staff is recommending an annual increase to the surface water management or SWIM service charges by 5.5% to adjust for inflation. The proposed increase is based on the Consumer Price Index U from June 2020 to June 2021. The 2022 SWIM fees for the different classes are presented within the summary section of the agenda bell and the ordinance. SWIM fees are the primary revenue source for the Surface Water Management Fund that accounts for the maintenance and improvements of the city's storm drainage system. It is important to note that rate adjustments and appeals are available per the city's code, including a low-income senior citizen property tax exemption. Staff recommends approval of Ordinance 786. This recommendation complies with the city's financial policies. This increase will help to keep up with inflation to keep the revenue from losing purchasing power. Inflation tends to erode the purchasing power of money over time.
Hey, Council, is there any questions? You have more on your presentation, Eric?
That concludes my presentation.
Go ahead, Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. I move to adopt ordinance number 786, increasing the 2022 SWM service charges.
We have a second. Do we have a second? Okay, hearing no second, motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, we're going to move right to the next item, which is adoption of, is there anything else on that motion? Go ahead, City Manager.
I'd ask for council direction going forward in terms of council would like to have this brought back for consideration on December 6th, or if there's an alternative motion not to incorporate these fee increases as part of consistent with the council's financial policies and also the budget that's being put forward. So I'd ask for some further clarification and direction from council.
Okay, Council. Go ahead, Councilor Michelin.
Thank you. I didn't support a second because I think right now an increase to the fees as proposed is too high. I don't necessarily think it needs to be keeping up with inflation. I don't think we need to get more money from this. I think charges and fees are overwhelming families and businesses and folks right now. I would like to see how it's incorporated more within the whole framework of the budget. So perhaps we can have another discussion on this at our next meeting to see how it fits within the framework of the budget. That's my concern, is that we're looking at user fees and additional payments to fund city operations, and right now with where COVID's at and other things we've done to reduce costs and stop payments for folks, I just think it's right now 5.5% is high, and that's why I'm not supporting a second to the motion.
Council, any other direction? Go ahead, Councilman Moore.
I would very much like to have this brought back. I think that it is my belief that perhaps if staff goes more in depth with the reason there is such a need for this, that perhaps council may be more inclined to approve this. Our city has an obligation to keep up with the needs of our people, and we need money to do that. And if we don't make the money to provide the services that our city requires, then well, we fall to ruin. So I would certainly ask that we bring this back for reconsideration. Maybe have staff give a more in-depth proposal and discussion on this and reconsider.
Okay, council, any other comments?
Mayor, this is the Eric Christensen Finance Director. Brian, just a friendly reminder that the deadline for submitting the fee changes to King County is November 30th.
Go ahead, Councilmember Schilling.
Eric, are you able to shed some light on what other jurisdictions are doing with these fees?
No, I have not. I believe Maya did take a scan. Is Maya available? I believe it was my understanding that she was going to pop on during this part of the presentation.
Brian, should we promote Maya in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that was confirmed last week.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. It took a little while to get through the promotion transition there. So stormwater fees, our program is very similar to most of the other programs in King County. So most everybody's stormwater divisions and capital programs around stormwater are based on a very similar stormwater fee, many of them close to identical to ours. Those fees, again, if they're not following inflation, which they have for years, if they don't continue to follow inflation, that means that we have to reduce what we're doing. So that means reducing our operations, reducing our capital program for stormwater. So this is everything stormwater. Our program includes our maintenance division, and all of the maintenance employees' salaries come out of here that are working on stormwater facilities, engineering design of capital facilities, engineering review of stormwater facilities that developers are bringing in. All of that is actually paid with budget from the stormwater program. So again, reducing it would mean that I'm a little bit nervous about what it means. And again, by not increasing it to be consistent with inflation, we're effectively reducing it. So it likely means that we would reduce our capital program, but also we are required to meet certain NPDES requirements. And that has to do with how much we maintain, how we document the maintenance, what we do as far as engineering review on developments. All of that is covered in our NPDES permit to stay compliant. And so there's some pretty serious legal obligations associated with the stormwater program. Capital, I wouldn't suggest letting that go too far behind, because you want to keep replacing stormwater pipe on a fairly regular basis so it doesn't start to fail, as we have some. This year, we are doing some projects that were emergencies because we have stormwater systems that are failing. We have 2 projects in the last year. And again, we need the funds to be able to respond to those quickly. So are there other things I can answer? I'm concerned about this, so happy to answer anything.
I'm going to go Councilmember Aragon and then Councilmember Sheldon.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think it would be helpful to be really concrete about projects that you're mentioning. So, when we're talking about water management, and for example, we've had a lot of comments about what's happening in Boulevard Park, for example. That's pretty, that's an example that's in front of us all the time. Can you talk about the connection to that? Or we also talked about some of the climate efforts that we're trying to do and align that with policy. So how does not keeping up with the fees you recommend keep us from meeting those needs?
Well, all of those things you mentioned are funded from the stormwater budget. So the Boulevard Park study, a good portion of the climate study that Boulevard Park, we also did get a grant for, but we're exceeding that grant. So we're spending money out of the stormwater fund. We are doing the Miller Creek realignment. We're committed to doing that this year. We received multi-million dollars in grants on that one, and our match for that comes out of the stormwater program. We did, I'm trying to think which other ones we did. We did a repair in Ambom Ambom of our stormwater system out of that program. Anything you see in the capital budget that is in the SWIM fund is coming out of this fund. So you have an entire section of your capital budget that's committed to stormwater. We did the pipe down in Eagle Landing this past year out of the stormwater fund. So that's one component of it. And then again, our NPDES requirements require us to meet certain inspection minimums. We have to clean all of the basins on a regular schedule. And you have, I can't remember how many basins. I don't even want to say it because it's several hundred, if not thousands of basins, but a lot. So I don't know how specific to be other than we can pull up the capital budget. I don't know if Rebecca, you're able to pull that up, but if you want to see the capital budget list, we can look at that really quick to know what's funded out of SWIM. Without it in front of me, I'm having a hard time remembering all of the projects in there, but certainly Miller Creek is one of our biggest ones for next year. Mosier Fields, actually, more of that project is funded from stormwater because we are treating untreated runoff in the Mosier Park area. So that is heavily funded by stormwater. Matter of fact, that's our biggest project in the stormwater fund right now.
Occidental, maybe?
Occidental is a surprise project that is being funded out of stormwater because of a pipe failure. And that was flooding a home, and we received actually had a claim against us for flooding that home. It is caused by the public system. This is the project that's a little different from Boulevard Park. And when in fact, this project is truly the failure of a public stormwater system is causing the flooding. And so we have to fix that. So that's another one that's an example. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Aragon, or do you?
So can I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Mayor? So when we're talking about we need to well, it sounds like routinely we examine whether or not it keeps up with inflation, and inflation has jumped pretty high this year. So we're talking about, when you say you're spending less, it's about our ability to actually like purchase the goods and the materials to do the projects that you're talking about.
And pay our staff. I mean, it pays part of our staff salaries. It means purchasing, materials, equipment, construction bids are going up. So that, I mean, and frankly, the big bids right now are probably beating that 5% from what we're seeing as far as increases. So, potentially we could have to cancel projects if we can't fund them. These projects all, typically stormwater projects are also water quality projects. So they're benefiting the Puget Sound and keeping our fish habitat healthy and those sorts of things.
Okay, Councilmember Schilling, and then I'm going to recognize Councilmember Tosta.
Thank you. I have a question that sort of jumps off of Councilmember Aragon's. She mentioned inflation is really high right now. It's abnormally high. In fact, it's historically high. And so I'm wondering what the increase to these fees would have been in a normal year. Eric, do you have the projections for if inflation wasn't insane right now, what it would normally have been in a year like this, projection wise? And then also second to that, what are we anticipating? And I know we probably don't have the answer to this right now because it was just signed into law today, but what would we be receiving from the $1.2 trillion national infrastructure bill to cover costs of infrastructure projects we have? Or if the state puts together an infrastructure package, what would we get from the state and from the federal government to cover costs for infrastructure? Is there an idea of what that would look like? I guess it would have been nice to have Lisette stay on the call, maybe. But Maya, you might know the answers to that question too. So those are a two-part question. What would inflation look like normally if it wasn't crazy and ahistoric? And so going off of Councilman Aragon's comment about how this is insane, and then what are we anticipating to get from the infrastructure packages that could potentially cover some costs?
Eric, off the top of your head, do you know what the last few CPIs have been?
Yeah, I can be more specific. In 2020, I could give actual numbers. In 2020, last year, we adopted a 0.9%, so less than 1%. Again, that's based on the CPI for the financial policies. In 2019, it was 2.3. In 2018, it was 3.3. 2017, it was 3.0.
Go ahead, Councilman Costa.
So if it's not too late, I'm prepared to second the motion because I do for multiple reasons. And thank you, Maya, for sort of all the details on this, because I do think it's helpful for the community and obviously council to understand. But we have a failing infrastructure. We know that. And it's just going to take ongoing maintenance. And some of the creative things that I think our public works is doing, like dealing with Mosier Field and treating the untreated water and the daylighting of Miller Creek, they're valuable things for the community. They're valuable things for salmon. And we are, from a climate preparedness perspective, going to have to continue to invest in our stormwater infrastructure. So I support this motion.
Okay. So we had a motion, but we have to have a motion because we didn't have a motion. But we had a
motion. Councilmember.
I made the motion.
Go ahead, City Attorney.
I'm sorry. I've been checking once. I kind of got the sense that perhaps the council was considering whether it should reconsider its vote. I do not see in this situation that it's appropriate for the council to reconsider its vote essentially immediately after it has taken a vote, in the absence of there being, let's say, an error or misunderstanding or question about the count. The next meeting I believe the council is scheduled to have is the 18th, which is this Thursday. And that's specific as to the budget, I believe, if that's correct. No?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
I
head shake. It's like, okay, if I'm wrong. That may provide an opportunity for this to be specifically noted, and for the council to be able to consider it and not have it essentially be a situation where you've taken a vote and then shortly thereafter essentially voted on the exact same thing and went in a different direction, in the absence of the reasons that are typically provided for in Robert's rules to reconsider a vote.
We didn't take a vote.
I think the initial, that's true that it wasn't a vote. There was a motion that no one seconded.
And I have just offered to second it.
I'm gonna let the city attorney dig into a little bit of that, and I'll recognize Councilmember Schilling, and I'll recognize City Manager Wilson, and I'll come back and reconsider the motion through Councilmember Moore. Go ahead, Councilmember Schilling.
Yeah, I have a question, but on the topic of this parliamentary procedure, technically a motion didn't die because we were discussing the motion. We never stopped the discussion of the topic on the table. So we never moved on to another topic. We never voted to move on. So technically, Councilmember Moore's motion is the topic of discussion on the table. We did not vote to move on. We did not leave this discussion. This is the topic of discussion.
With respect, my recollection isn't exactly that. It appeared as though the motion was made, and then Mayor Mata asked if there was a second, and I believe he may have asked that. I know he asked it at least twice, and there was no second. And at that point, it appeared as though that motion died, and the council was prepared to move forward. And then there was a statement made or an inquiry made by the finance or by staff asking about the concern of this has to be addressed before the end of the month. So my concern is this. I mean, I understand what the council wants to do, and I certainly don't want to keep the council from doing it. I also don't want for the council to do something that procedurally raises a question where it could be later challenged as being procedurally improper. So it may be more clean to not attempt to essentially reopen or put this motion before the council again at the same meeting, rather than perhaps addressing that on the 18th, which would still be timely, I believe, for finance purposes, for budget purposes, but also not potentially have the council run afoul of a procedural requirement or limitation.
I could call that motion out of order, but I can also call a motion to reconsider. And if it's a majority of council, wouldn't that be appropriate under Robert's Rules of Order? City Attorney? So if I get a unanimous, then we're good to go. If I get a no, then we're gonna discuss until the next meeting.
If you have a unanimous consent, I do believe that you can have a motion to reconsider. But remember, a motion to reconsider a vote. And right now, what you're saying, in fact, Councilor Tassa said, is that there was no vote. It was simply the motion itself was never seconded. Exactly.
Yeah, died for the lack of a second. However, somebody can make a motion to reconsider. And if we get a majority of this council to say yes, then we go back to discussion on the motion, because now we can put a new motion on the floor. Good with that? So unless I get a motion to reconsider the motion that died for lack of a second. That would, go ahead, Councilmember.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor. And remind me, are we voting on the entire budget on Thursday? Because there's something to be said about these different pieces and having the full picture and voting it along with the budget. So, because there may be, you know, in considering all these other portions of the budget, can influence like how I support this particular piece. So, so it sounds like we can, even if we vote on it someone votes on it on Thursday, it'd still be timely, and we would get other pieces of the budget for us to consider in context. Okay.
All right, Councilmember Schilling, you got your hand up. Is that because it was left up, or do you have another question?
I have another question, if I could, really quick, but it sounds like we're going to be able to talk about this at another time. I asked this at the last meeting about this, and I'm wondering if we do have a cost breakdown of what the fees would look like for a household. I just would really like to see that, because I can't remember if it's in the agenda or not. If I already saw it, it is okay. I already saw it. I'm just there's a lot to discuss. So I'd like, but if we can have that as well in the discussion, that'd be beneficial.
All right, Councilman Moore.
So there is in the agenda bill for this subject, there is the rates included, including residential and non-residential. So the cost associated for households on average is listed. It's pretty minimal. Speaking as somebody who has been low income for a very long time, the costs for this are small for any household to account for. And as we've heard, the need for this money to be allocated is very important. We have emails about flooding coming in almost daily, if not every day. And I mean, if you look outside, we're hitting wet season, right? And so we can see in real time the damage that can be done if we're not handling our surface water, if we're not managing that. And we have so many projects that need to be attended to at this point. Again, if we're not handling this and we're not allocating the funds for it and ensuring that we have budgeted for this, our city is and our projects are going to fall apart. We are already very low on staff. We work with a bare bones staff. So staff cuts are probably not something that we want to see. I just encourage my fellow council members to support this. I appreciate concern for the cost burdens that households might face, but it's very minimal. It's very minimal, and it's nothing compared to what our city might incur if we fall short on our duties in managing everything in regards to our surface water and all the projects and our staffing related to that. So,
Okay, council. So here's where I'm at here with this. Okay, because we can have this discussion all night, and we have no order here. Okay. So now we've allowed a presentation to be done on why it's important, why it's not important. And so what I need direction from this council is whether we push it to the next meeting, which is going to be the Thursday, which is part of the budget cycle, or we make a motion to reconsider the motion that died for the lack of a second, and then we create another motion to have this discussion, to continue the discussion on this subject. So those are the options here, council. So we can, because I need direction here to set the meeting back in order. Go ahead, Councilmember Moore.
if I'm not mistaken, I believe a motion to reconsider is only applicable to a motion that's been voted on already.
Motion died for lack of a second. So I brought the motion. I asked 2 times, is there a second? There was no second. I asked.
Right.
So the motion died for lack of second. It didn't get discussed, but it died for a lack of second. So if we're going to reconsider it under the minutes, then we need to take a vote for it to see if it's still going to lack for a second. I don't know. So we can either have a discussion to bring this to the next meeting where we'll be talking about the budget, which is Thursday. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm going to recommend that the council move this to Thursday. I believe it is cleaner procedurally, and especially with something that's related to your budget. You do not want to have a situation where potentially there's a claim that the action that you took was actually unlawful or not valid.
Okay, council. So you've heard the city attorney. You've heard my position on this particular issue. So I'll take a motion from any council member so we can move this meeting forward. Go ahead, Councilmember Schilling.
I move to have this item brought to us on Thursday's meeting.
Second.
Before we sit, can we get a time on that meeting, please?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. And can I get the date of that meeting, please?
Thursday, the 18th.
Thursday, November 18th, 6 p.m. This is a motion to move it to then. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
We got a second by Councilmember Aragon, and we'll have some discussion. Go ahead, Councilmember Schilling.
Yeah, I just have a quick question about this meeting. I do not have a calendar item for it on my council calendar. Is it the whole council?
So this item has been on the planning calendar for about a month now. It was requested actually by you, Councilmember Schilling, I believe, and approved via the city manager's report in October. And we send out the calendar invites when we send out the actual agenda. So you will be getting a calendar invite once this agenda is posted, which should be in the next 2 days.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I didn't see a calendar invite, so I wasn't sure about that. So thanks for clarifying that and having that on our agenda.
Okay. Any more discussion? Hearing no more discussion, all those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. We're going to move right into F, please. And that's adoption of ordinance number 785, property tax levy. This is our finance director, Eric Christensen. Go ahead, Eric.